The kitchen smelled like coffee grounds and dish soap, the way it always did at 6:45 in the morning. Carol stood at the counter in Naperville, Illinois, in a house with a mudroom that still had her son's soccer cleats by the door even though he hadn't lived there in 11 years. She was rinsing the French press. She did it the same way every morning. 3 counterclockwise turns, 1 tap against the sink basin, water on. Her hands did not need her mind for this. The television in the den was running. Frank's voice carried over it, rehearsing something, the way he did before a presentation. She could hear the shape of his words without hearing the words themselves, that practiced baritone, the slight lift at the end of each sentence, the voice of a man performing for a room that wasn't there yet. She dried her hands on the dish towel, the blue one, fraying at the hem, and began making his lunch. Turkey on sourdough, no mustard. She had not needed to ask in 14 years. The dinner was that Friday, the Merritt and Associates Fall Client Gala, held every year at the Hyatt Regency on Wacker Drive. 31 floors up with a view of the river that Frank liked to point out to people as if he had placed it there himself. Carol had ironed his shirts the night before. 3 of them she had done the collars twice. She was wrapping the sandwich in parchment paper when Frank came in. He was in his good charcoal suit already, at 6:47 in the morning. He looked at his phone, then at her. "You're coming Friday, right?" "Diane Foss is bringing her husband. Makes it look better if—" "He'll be there," Carol said. He nodded and poured himself coffee into the travel mug she had already filled. He did not say thank you. He had stopped saying it somewhere around 2009, and she had stopped waiting for it somewhere around 2011. She finished packing his bag, laptop charger, folder, the Ticonderoga pencils he preferred for marking up drafts. She had been packing it, in some version, for 22 years. The gala was everything Frank liked. The room ran warm and gold. A quartet played near the window. Carol stood beside him as he worked the space, his hand finding her, elbow occasionally, steering her gently the way you steer furniture. She was talking to a woman named Patricia Huang, a client's wife, an ER physician, from Evanston, about the hospital's new trauma wing when she heard it. Frank, behind her, talking to a man she did not recognize. Younger, maybe 30, with the look of someone who had recently become important. The legal structure of the early contracts, yeah, that was a whole thing. I basically built that framework from scratch. Before we had a real team, you figure it out, you know? She did not turn around. "And who's that?" The man said, and she felt, before she saw, that he was looking at her. Frank's pause was less than a second. "That's just the wife." Patricia Huang stopped talking mid-sentence. Carol watched the woman's face rearrange itself, the small tightening around the eyes, the fractional dip of the chin, the way a person looks when they have witnessed something they are not sure they heard correctly. Carol smiled at Patricia. "Sorry, you were saying about the trauma wing?" Her voice came out even. Her hands, at her sides, had gone very still. "Before we continue, if this story is already sitting somewhere in your chest, I want you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel right now, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from, how old you are, and what time it is, where you are. I read every single one. It reminds me who I am telling the story for. Now, back to Carol. Patricia said something. Carol nodded. Across the room, Frank laughed at something the young man said. She stayed for another 40 minutes. She thanked the catering staff by name. She rode home in the passenger seat while Frank talked about the quarterly numbers, and she looked out the window at the lights of Chicago sliding past on I-290, and she did not say a single word the entire way home, and she counted every contract she had drafted at that kitchen table, every clause she had written by hand on a legal pad at midnight while Frank slept, every call she had taken in the school pickup line because his assistant had not shown up, every hour she could not account for in any document that bore her name. She counted, and the number did not surprise her. What surprised her was that she had stopped counting years ago. The attic had a specific cold to it, not the cold of winter, but the cold of disuse, the kind that settles into a space when no one has needed it in a long time. Carol pulled the string on the overhead bulb and stood at the top of the pull-down stairs while the light swung once and steadied. She had told herself she was looking for the box of Christmas ornaments. She was not looking for the Christmas ornaments. The fireproof lockbox was behind a rolled yoga mat and 3 bins of her son Derek's school projects she had never been able to throw away. Gray metal, the size of a shoebox, with a combination she had not forgotten because she had chosen it the year she passed the bar. 1994. She turned the dial, the latch released. The manila envelope was on top, her name on the front, in her own handwriting. Carol Ann Merritt. Not Carol Frank's wife, not Carol of the iron shirts and the fraying dish towel. Carol Ann Merritt, J.D., who had graduated 4th in her class at Loyola and received job offers from 2 firms before she had even walked across the stage. She sat down on a bin of Derek's old science fair trophies and held the envelope without opening it. The memory came the way those memories always do. Not like a film, but like a smell, specific and without warning. It was March of 2002. Derek was 4. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the old round one from their first apartment in Wicker Park. And Frank had laid out his business plan on 3 pages of yellow notebook paper. He was leaving the firm, going out on his own. He needed 6 months, maybe 8. He needed her to hold things together. Just until I get the first 2 clients, he had said. Just until we're stable, she had looked at the notebook paper. She had looked at her son's hands wrapped around a cup of apple juice. She had thought about the Hendricks coal contract she was in the middle of, the one her supervising partner had specifically put her name on. She had said yes. What no one tells you about calculated trades is that they do not feel like surrender in the moment. They feel like strategy. They feel like love. They feel like the intelligent, selfless choice that a capable woman makes because she can see the whole board, and she is confident. She is so confident that when it is over, when the 6 months become 8 and the 8 become a year and the year becomes a decade, the person she made the trade with will remember what it cost her. Frank had never remembered, or he had remembered and decided it did not count. She was not sure, sitting in that cold attic at 11:30 on a Friday night, which of those was worse. She opened the envelope, her bar card, her license, and the brief, 12 pages, handwritten on yellow legal paper. The Kellerman-Voss commercial lease dispute. Her last case before she walked away. Her handwriting was smaller then, more certain. She read the first page, she read all 12. She sat up there for a long time after that, with the brief in her lap and the bulb swinging very slightly above her, and something in her chest that had been sealed for 19 years, cracked open along a seam so clean it might have been waiting. She did not cry. She went downstairs, poured the last of the coffee, opened her laptop, and typed 4 words into the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission website. Reinstatement, continuing education, requirements. She had already completed 31 of the required 40 hours. She had been doing it quietly in the evenings for 2 years. Before we continue, if you have ever made a trade that was never honored, if you have ever quietly prepared for something you did not yet have words for, stay with me. Drop your city in the comments right now. Tell me you are here, now. Back to Carol. She did not know, yet, that 3 weeks earlier, a woman named Nina Castillo, junior partner at Hargrove and Solis on South Wacker Drive, had pulled an archived commercial lease brief from 2001 while preparing a case, had read it twice, had written a name in the margin of her legal pad and circled it, Carol Ann Merritt, and then typed that name into a search bar. The reinstatement application took 40 minutes to complete. Carol submitted it at 12:53 in the morning. She closed the laptop, washed her coffee cup, placed it upside down in the drying rack. Frank did not stir. She lay in the dark on her side of the mattress and stared at the ceiling and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a woman with a plan. Nina Castillo called on a Tuesday. Carol was in the car, parked outside a Jewel Osco on Route 59, and she almost did not answer because the number was a 312 area code she did not recognize. She answered on the 4th ring, the way you answer when you are not sure you want to know. Is this Carol Merritt? Carol Ann Merritt, J.D.? The J.D., she had not heard anyone say that in 20 years. It is, Carol said. Nina's voice was efficient and warm at the same time, the voice of someone who had learned to deliver confidence like a handshake. She explained about the archived brief, the Kellerman-Voss case. She said she had read it 3 times and that the jurisdictional argument on page 9 was, in her professional opinion, still ahead of how most attorneys were thinking about commercial lease disputes today. Carol sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the heat on low. "What is it you're looking for?" Carol asked. "Senior counsel," Nina said. "Contract basis to start. We have a client situation that needs exactly the kind of mind that wrote that brief, and I looked you up. I know you've been completing your CE hours." A silence opened between them. "I am not looking for a project," Carol said carefully. "I am not offering you a project," Nina said. "I am offering you a door." Carol looked at the grocery store, at the automatic doors sliding open and closed for a woman pushing a cart full of paper towels, at her own reflection in the windshield. "I'll meet you for coffee," she said. They met at a Intelligentsia on Broadway, and Nina arrived 7 minutes early and had already ordered for both of them, which Carol noted. Nina was 38 and wore the kind of understated blazer that announced serious intent without requiring your attention. She had a yellow legal pad. She did not apologize for it. She slid a folder across the table. Carol opened it, read for 4 minutes without speaking, turned back to page 2 and read it again. "The Alderton Group tried to bury this lease clause in the amendment." Carol said, "Yes, that's not accidental. That's deliberate concealment." "That's what I thought," Nina said. "That's why I need you." Carol closed the folder. She picked up her coffee. She thought about Frank that morning, standing in the kitchen in his good charcoal suit at 6:47, lifting the travel mug she had already filled without looking up from his phone. She thought about a young man at a gala asking who she was. "Send me the full file," Carol said. She worked for 11 days at the kitchen table after Frank left for the office. The yellow legal pads came out of the drawer she had not opened in years. She found her old case law databases, and her login still worked, which seemed improbable, and then seemed exactly right. Her handwriting was the same. Her mind moved the way she had forgotten it could move. Fast and lateral and building, one clause leading to the next like steps she had always known were there. On the 8th day, she filed her reinstatement paperwork with the IRC. Her bar number was restored 4 days later. She read the confirmation email 3 times in the parking lot of Derek's old elementary school, sitting in her car with the heat running, and then she put her phone in her purse and drove home and started dinner. Meanwhile, 3 miles north on I-88, Frank Merritt was having the best month of his professional life. The Illinois Business Leadership Awards had shortlisted Merritt and Associates for the Firm Legacy Award. He had told Carol over dinner expansively with the particular shine of a man who believes his moment has arrived. He talked about the early contracts, the framework he had built from scratch, the vision. She had passed him the salad. She had said, "That's wonderful, Frank." He had not noticed her hands. The gala was, in 19 days, Nina called her the evening before Carol's first official day at Hargrove and Solis. She asked if Carol had anything to wear to the Illinois Business Leadership Awards. Carol paused. "Why?" "Because Hargrove and Solis is a sponsor," Nina said. "We have a table, and I think you should be at it." The pause that followed was long enough that Nina did not fill it. She had learned in 11 days that Carol's silences were not emptiness. They were the sound of a decision being made. "I'll find something," Carol said. She went upstairs. She stood in front of the closet for a long moment, then pushed past Frank's dry cleaning, past the garment bags she hadn't touched, and found at the very back, still in its original bag from a shop on Michigan Avenue, a charcoal wool dress she had bought in 2000 and one for a closing dinner she had never gotten to attend. She unzipped the bag. It still fit. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself, really looked, for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure. She was 58 years old. She had graduated 4th in her class. She had written the brief that built his firm. The cab driver who took her to the Hargrove and Solis office the next morning glanced in the rearview mirror as she got in and said, without particular reason, "You got somewhere important to be?" Carol looked out the window at the Chicago skyline coming into view over the highway. "Yes," she said, "I do." She had 17 days. The Marriott on Michigan Avenue smelled like hothouse lilies and warm bread and the particular cologne of men who had recently become important. The ballroom on the 3rd floor was already full when Carol arrived. Crystal on every table, a podium with the Illinois Business Leadership seal, waitstaff moving through the room with the practiced invisibility of people who understood their function. Carol checked her coat at the door and stood for a moment at the top of the ballroom steps. Nina appeared at her elbow. "You ready?" "I've been ready for 22 years, Carol said. "I just didn't know it." They found the Hargrove and Solis table near the center of the room. Carol sat down, placed her evening bag in her lap, and looked across the ballroom. Frank was at a table near the stage. He was in his best suit, the navy one, not the charcoal, and he was talking to a man she recognized as the president of the Greater Chicago Business Council. His posture was the posture of a man who believed the room had been arranged specifically for him. He had not looked her way. She picked up her water glass and drank and waited. The program began at 7. 3 awards before the firm Legacy Award. Carol listened to each one with her hands flat on the table and her breathing even. Nina glanced at her once and said nothing. When the council president stepped to the podium and began describing the firm Legacy Award recipient, Carol heard Frank's name and watched him stand from across the room, watched him button his jacket, watched him smile at the people at his table the way you smile when the outcome was never in doubt. The foundational work of Merritt and Associates, the president was saying, particularly the early commercial contract frameworks that established the firm's reputation in the 90s and early 2000s. She heard every word. She had written those frameworks. At the podium, Frank began to speak. He thanked the council, he thanked his team, he used the word vision 4 times in 90 seconds. He said that building something from nothing required a particular kind of commitment, a willingness to sacrifice, and he paused there in a way that was clearly rehearsed. He did not say her name. She had not expected him to. What came next was not in his program. Richard Hargrove, 64 years old, senior founding partner of Hargrove and Solis. A man whose name was on the side of a building on South Wacker Drive stood from the Hargrove table before the applause had fully settled and asked the council president for 30 seconds. The room quieted in the way rooms quiet for Richard Hargrove. "I want to take this moment," he said, not at the podium but standing where he was, so that the room had to turn to find him, "to acknowledge someone in this room whose work I have been reviewing for the past several weeks." The commercial lease jurisprudence that underpins at least 3 of the contracts this award references was drafted by an attorney named Carol Ann Merritt. She is sitting at my firm's table tonight, and as of this month she is senior counsel at Hargrove and Solis. The room turned, and Frank Merritt, standing at the podium with his hands still on the edges of it, turned with the room. He found her face in 4 seconds. She counted. She watched him recognize her. Watched the precise moment his expression moved from confusion to calculation to something that was almost, but not quite, fear. He stepped away from the podium. He crossed the room. "She did not stand, Carol," he said. His voice had lost the baritone. "Carol, I was going to mention, you don't have to explain," she said. "These people think that the contracts were a team effort, obviously. Frank," he stopped. She looked at him the way you look at a thing you have been carrying for a very long time and have finally set down on the ground in front of you. "You built a career on work you never acknowledged," she said. "That's not legacy, that's a debt," she said it quietly. "The way you say something that does not require an audience because it has already been true for 22 years. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She picked up her evening bag and stood. "I'm not carrying this anymore," she said. She walked across the ballroom toward the exit without hurrying. Nina fell into step beside her at the door, and they collected their coats and walked out onto Michigan Avenue where the November air was clean and cold and smelled like the lake. Neither of them said anything for half a block. Then Nina said, "You want to get a drink?" "Yes," Carol said. "I do." 1 year later, the kitchen in the Naperville house was quieter. Carol stood at the counter at 6:45 in the morning. Same time, different light. The French press, the dish towel. A new one now, green. Black coffee in a travel mug. She filled herself. On the counter beside the coffee maker sat a yellow legal pad, the top page covered in her small, certain handwriting, a case file from Hargrove and Solis. The Alderton Group matter had settled in April favorably, and there were 2 new files behind it. Through the kitchen window, the yard was bare and bright with early winter sun. She had seen Frank once, at Derek's birthday dinner in September. He had arrived late and left early and sat at the far end of the table and refilled his own water glass. He was surviving, that was the word for it. She had not stopped walking toward him, and she had not stopped walking away from him. She had simply continued. She picked up the travel mug and her legal pad and her keys. In the front hallway she passed the console table where the mail collected, and on it, propped against the wall, was her bar license in a plain wooden frame. Reinstated, current, her name on it in full. Carol Ann Merritt. J.D. She looked at it for exactly 1 second, the way you look at something that was always yours. Then she opened the door and walked out into the cold and the light. Some women are buried so carefully, so quietly by the people closest to them that the world forgets to look for them. But here is what the world does not understand, what it has never understood. Buried things do not disappear, they wait, and that is where I will leave you today. If Carol's story stayed with you, if some part of it felt familiar, I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? Have you ever made a trade that was never honored? Tell me in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you are new here, go check the playlist on your screen right now. There are stories waiting for you there that feel exactly like this one. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.